Okay. I think it is time. We're going to switch over to the interview format. Is there anything else or updates I gotta tell y'all before that happens? Nah. I think that's good, man. Make sure y'all follow Perspective, man. We're gonna get right into it. Hold on. Perspective. I done told you we have a special guest and a special treat. And today, we're joined by my good friend, Jerrell Gray, the urban planner from Flatbush, New York. Man, go ahead and say what's up.
Yes, sir. Yo, what's up, yo?
Yes, sir. And listen, I got a good bio to read from my good friend. Give me a second. We're right here with it. Jerrell Gray is an urban planner and community organizer from Flatbush, Brooklyn. The son of Grenadian and Guyanese immigrants, Jerrell is currently the Assistant Director of Health Policy and Government Affairs at Public Health Solutions, the city's largest public health nonprofit. Outside of work, he dabbles in Prospect Lefferts Gardens Neighborhood Association and Strategy for Black Lives. He's well decorated, accomplished man. And, I'm glad that he's over here joining us.
Appreciate that, bro.
Yes, here at the Perspective Media Network. Listen, we have an upcoming election, so he dabbles in NYC politics, but also talks about urban planning. So we have a lot to talk about. Mm-hmm. First off, how you feel about Zeron? Actually, no, let me introduce yourself, and you can speak a little bit to the network.
Yeah, appreciate you, man. I'm very excited to be the first interview on my brother's podcast.
Yes,
I've been seeing the work. It's not a podcast.
It's not a podcast, man.
For facts, we're going to be yapping on this. But no, happy to be here, share some knowledge. I've got into urban planning, been into local politics, local organizations. So have a wealth of knowledge that I can share with y'all, especially from a Gen Z perspective. I know still got the baby face, no beard. He got more facial hair than me. And I'm not going to tell my age, but I'm a little bit older than him. But happy to be here, ready to cook up, some topics we got for y'all. So
Of course. So I'm not going to ask you this the wrong question yet, but with the upcoming local election, what's a characteristic or a list of characteristics regarding leadership that you kind of look for in a candidate?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the biggest thing and the first thing when I'm thinking about a candidate and evaluating a candidate is seeing if they're in touch with reality. And what do I mean by that? So if I'm speaking to a candidate and I tell them that, my biggest issues is my ability to pay rent or to buy food, buy groceries. And they look at me and say, okay, Jerrell, appreciate you for sharing. I'm going to hire 5,000 police officers. It's clear that person is out of touch with my reality, and he's out of touch with the millions of other New Yorkers who are telling people the same thing, right? It's hard to pay for rent, it's expensive, and it's hard to pay for groceries.
Affordability.
So it's just a level of discernment that I would want to see from that candidate, to be able to listen to my problems, assess them, and actually put together solutions that addresses what I'm doing. And second, I think a big thing is courage, right? Being a candidate in itself is a courageous act. Subjecting yourself to a lot of scrutiny for people to come at your history, look at your resume, your family, look through your pictures, looking for anything, right? So I think it's a courageous act, even being a candidate. Yeah. And then I think it takes even more courage to go against special interests, people who have a lot of money, who may be lobbying and spending millions
Super
against
PACs.
Your campaign. Exactly. And it's also courageous to go against the status quo, right? To go against people who are telling you that, this is how things have been done and we're going to continue to do this. Yeah. And it's courageous to be like, no, let's try something different, right? Innovation is being courageous. So I think, those are probably like the top two things that I really care about when it comes to, looking at a candidate.
Yeah, definitely. I guess like even talking about like that affordability aspect, you're from Flatbush, Brooklyn. So it's definitely like, I guess talking about housing and just health is definitely prominent within those areas because I mean I know a lot of Black people are struggling at the moment with the rising unemployment and especially like gentrification. So I guess talk a little bit to what an urban planner is.
Yeah, so urban planning is a field where you're given a plethora of skills to be able to study cities, analyze trends, past, present, and forward-looking of cities, neighborhoods, and come with solutions to be able to solve people's problems from neighborhood to neighborhood to city. Yeah. Right. So I think, you get there's people who focus on transportation, MTA down to the bus stops where trees are in your neighborhood, bike lanes. There's urban planners that focus on housing, urban planners. And then for me personally, I've always been interested in being like an interdisciplinary, like jack of all trades.
So then how'd you end up, I guess, in health?
Great question. So I'm in public health. And more or less, the reason why I got into urban planning was to be able to, one, understand what was happening in my neighborhood, but also acquire that language so I could be able to, communicate it back to people like me who might be experiencing the same things.
Yeah.
And with that, the goal was always to get resources into people who need them the most. And public health and urban planning are overlapping disciplines, right? If your neighborhood doesn't have a lot of trees, or you live near a highway, right, you might be more susceptible to asthma and other respiratory issues. If you live in a food desert and don't have access to healthy, fresh food, right, you're more likely going to be susceptible to hypertension, diabetes, right, heart disease. And if you don't have stable housing, it's more likely than not you're not taking care of your health, right? So it's been a seamless transition working in public health, and the goal's always been to get these neighborhoods and the most vulnerable people resources, and that's what I've been doing.
Yeah, so I think urban planning is so cool because even I guess the intersection within public health, because when you talk about kind of like the diet stuff, like my friend's a dietitian, and we lived in Lower East Side for NYU, but I lived in a food desert for years, and just not even never experiencing that before, and then moving there and then going to Brooklyn a little bit where there's a bunch of food deserts and just not affordable grocery stores like Key Food or like Lincoln Market or Union Market, that a bunch of grocery stores are coming in. That's why I kind of like Zoran's free grocery store, not free grocery stores, but like reduced grocery stores, because it's just like, bro, a lot of these grocery stores are putting a $3, $2 premiums on top of something, when if you go to Trader Joe's down in downtown Brooklyn, eggs might be $3, $4. At one of those markets, it's going to be $7, $8, $9.
So yeah, it's even crazy that we have like this, I don't think Poughkeepsie's upstate, but this upstate downstate dynamic, right? So
Shout
I did
845.
Yeah, so I went to school in Western New York. I want to get my geography right. I went to school in Rochester, and the big thing up there was Wegmans. And like you said, right, growing up in Brooklyn, my mom compared the prices amongst the local supermarkets, right? So if Key Food had a higher price than Associated, we were going to Associated, and if Associated had a higher price than Ideal, we were going to Ideal or Seatown, right? But once I got older and started shopping in Trader Joe's and started shopping in Wegmans, I started to notice that, I thought these bigger, more higher quality brands would be more expensive, and they were actually a lot cheaper than the local supermarkets, which is crazy. So, no. Yeah, but there's definitely a ton of overlaps.
Yeah. And I guess harping a little bit on Brooklyn and Flatbush, I know you do a couple of community things there, so can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, so I got my start in organizing in 2020 with a group called Strategy for Black Lives, right? I played football and just was focused on school. But after the murder of George Floyd, some of my friends came together and they started an organization in May 2020. And, I joined, learned how to community organize, and we did a lot of great stuff for 5 years, right? We started off protesting in the streets and telling people to fill out their census.
Okay.
But,
groundwork.
And then it elevated to being like a real community organization, right? We help people apply for their community board. We held virtual forums during the Zoom era for all of the citywide races, mayor, comptroller, Manhattan DA. We did that with a bunch of other organizations. One of the programs that I led was a Black Fatherhood Circle. We brought 75 Black fathers from the New York City region, New York, New Jersey region, brought in a therapist, had discussion, breakfast. And then we also threw an annual Juneteenth celebration that within the last year, had over 1,000 people.
Oh,
right?
wow.
So
sounds like Prospect.
Yeah, so with that, it was up in Harlem, but no, so that's really how I got my start, and now stay involved in my fraternity, working with our mentorship program, Brooklyn high school students. Recently got involved with my neighborhood association. We did a local film screening where we showed 3 films from New York-based directors and had them do a Q&A after we showed their film in a black-owned business too, right? So, I always wanted to, once I got back from Rochester a couple years ago, my goal was to organize where my feet was at and organize in my hood. So,
and that's good that you're saying that, because I wanted to highlight that, because a lot of people ask, especially younger people, and even people that move into Brooklyn or move into New York, some people would call them transplants, ask how would they get organized, or how would they get involved into their communities and stuff like that. But sometimes it's as simple as a Google search, or or what's some other strategies that you think?
No, literally, it's just, look for like, first off, find your interest, find your niche, right? And like, you don't have to do everything, right? There's a whole bunch of organizations that do food distributions, especially what's going on with the federal government now. I think that's going to be very important. So people,
you talking about the shutdown?
Yeah, the shutdown with SNAP. I think a lot of people are going to be going hungry. A lot of people,
42 million of Americans rely on SNAP and EBT.
Exactly. So get involved with the local food pantry. A lot of neighborhoods have like community gardens that you could go and volunteer with. There's organizations that's doing donation drives, right? Like there's a plethora of things. All you have to do is like search up a neighborhood and then search up volunteering. Yeah. And I'm sure there's going to be a list of organizations that are doing great work, but even down to a more local level, speak to your neighbors, right? Somebody's bound to put you on, right? Say good morning, right? And it's so funny. It's coming from a Caribbean household, right? Like it was hard for me to walk past some of my elders in the neighborhood and be like not saying good morning. Yeah. So every now and again, I'm coming from the gym, I hit somebody, hey, good morning, and they'd be like, oh, good morning. Like they wouldn't expect.
I was literally walking on Snyder. And it was
Snyder. What you know about that? I'm going on about no Flatbush.
It was a Sunday morning. I'm like, bro, I don't know. It was a Sunday morning, so everybody's outside. It's like elderly people, they're probably sweeping the street, literally. And I was like, let me see some good mornings. And I just haven't. It felt like I haven't said good morning in so long, but it just felt appreciated, like especially the two elder people that I said it to, like the faces light up and stuff like that. And that's how you build a lot more community, even when you feel like sometimes it's lost, especially because they waiting on it.
Yeah, for a fact. Don't be scary.
Okay, along those lines, I guess, what does a united Flatbush Brooklyn look like to you, and what's some structural changes that you could see?
So crazy how you asked about structural changes. So I'm just going to jump out the gun and say that I think New York City needs a black agenda, right? Not yet working class. I didn't say working class. I didn't say BIPOC. I said a black agenda.
Talk about it.
And the reason why I'm saying that is because between 2010 and 2020, New York City lost 84,000 black residents.
But wait, say it again?
Between 2010 and 2020, New York City lost 84,000 black residents.
Damn.
69,000 of those residents came from Brooklyn.
Damn.
And 20,000 of the residents came from my neighborhood of Flatbush.
Bro, no way.
Exactly. And now if you take a peek to the prior decade, right? 2000 to 2010, urban planner, I got to have the numbers. During that decade, New York City lost a little bit over 100,000 black residents.
That sounds like a second migration.
So what that means,
second great migration.
Exactly. So what that means, right? Yeah. So what that means is within the first 2 decades of this century, 2000 to 2020, New York City lost nearly 200,000 black residents.
But that's crazy. That's crazy.
Exactly.
And I wonder what's the numbers right now, like between 2024 to 2025, because black unemployment rate just hit 7%, which is skyrocketing compared to other races. So you hyper fixating on black is especially what I want to talk about as well, because I'm like, that's what we're seeing right now in America.
Exactly. And think about it, right? This is not just like, a data point. This is not just like people leaving. This is culture leaving these neighborhoods, right? Leaving Flatbush, leaving Bed-Stuy, leaving Harlem, leaving Crown Heights, leaving South Bronx, Southeast Queens, right? This is culture. This is history. This is wealth. This is people and everything that they brought to the neighborhood.
And like people, the reason as to why New York has so much like culture is because of that. But it's like, bro, people want to come to New York. People want to be New Yorkers. And a huge reason of that is that culture that you're talking about. And a lot of that culture, that New York culture, comes from black people as well. I mean, you think like, the only Renaissance in American history is the Harlem Renaissance. Don't let that go over your head. The only Renaissance in American history is the Harlem Renaissance. And it's not even widely spoken about as much anymore. And a lot of that history is kind of waning. Yeah,
and it's even crazier. You just asked, like, what are the numbers now, right? We're in the middle of the 3rd decade of the century, right? So in 5 years, when the census comes out again, people are going to have to fill out forms. I'm hoping when the data comes out in 2031 that another 50, 60, 70,000 black people have left the city again. This is a black exodus. And I think we need to be very intentional about, our policy decisions, what we do to protect this population of people. So,
dang. So I guess speaking about the upcoming election, how do you feel about Jerrell? Because he's destined to win. It's been looking by the numbers.
That's my guy, point blank, period. It's not over. Make sure you get registered to vote. I think tomorrow is the last day to get registered to vote. And, early voting starts, I think, October 25th. So, yeah, I think he's a guy to do it. Point blank. Period. That's my guy. I met him in May earlier this year.
Why though?
Why? I think earlier you asked me about what are some of the qualities that I care about, and I think he's someone who listens, right? Almost a year ago when he started his campaign, one of the first things that he did was interview immigrant working class people from different boroughs about why they ended up voting for Trump. And people spoke about the genocide in Palestine was one of them, and rising grocery costs, right? Like that's why they ended up voting for Trump, and Trump really manipulated people like, oh, your eggs is expensive, XYZ. But people take heed to that. So I think he's someone who actually listened, and that's why his policy proposal is like, all right, grocery stores, right? People complain about groceries, so I'm gonna bring in grocery stores, five in New York City, one in each borough. I talked about freezing the rent for people, right? Giving immediate relief to some of the most low income people in the city, and amongst other things. So I think he listens. I think he has a level of discernment to listen to people, which is why he ran such a great campaign. I think he has the courage to go against the status quo, right? And the people with special interest that's been spending millions of dollars to thwart his campaign, and he continuously overcame that. And I think there's a level of integrity that we haven't seen in a while, right? We have Eric Adams, who was indicted, Andrew Cuomo, was accused, charged sexual harassment, sexual assault, amongst other scandals, right? I think Zoran brings a younger, fresh new face that people actually trust, and he went and he knocked on people's doors as well, and he didn't, he made sure to speak to people. So
yeah, and I feel like, do you think that that's like the new wave where it's like it's going to be like a social media takeover for a lot of I guess like newer politicians? Like is that the path?
I think that's definitely going to be part of it. I don't think that's the whole thing, right? I think a lot of neighborhoods, and we definitely don't want to forget our elders too, who might not be too adept on social media, right? Yeah. But I definitely do think your social media,
voters.
Your social media branding definitely is important to connect to more people. The city is still growing. Gen Z is going to be, Gen Z's in the voter population. So I definitely think you got to do both. You got to knock on doors, talk to the people that may not be on social media, but you do need to be impressionable on social media. Definitely, I've seen it hurt other candidates. So it's going to be a combination.
Do you know a huge common talking point against Zoran, especially amongst like minority conservatives, is like most of Zoran's population that voted for him, or that voted for him in the primary, was not the minorities that kind of like represent on social media. How do you evaluate that?
So crazy enough, I actually was featured in an article in AP News a couple months back about this, and I think.
Wait, hold on. Shout that out, man.
Yeah.
Wait, you said in the article in the AP News?
Yeah, I got a little lead quote. Shout out my guy Jalen.
Hey, fire.
No, but I think part of that is true, right? But I also think his campaign did make an effort to go in the neighborhoods, right? The only candidate that knocked on my door in Flatbush was Zoran. His team came twice, right?
It came to my door a couple times
exactly. There's people who, he made sure there was canvases out in Canarsie, canvases out in East Flatbush, canvases out in Bed-Stuy, canvases out in Brownsville, right? So I think even though his demographic definitely was like the younger population of voters, not the traditional, black immigrant minority voters, I think he still made an effort to try to bridge those gaps, and there's definitely more work to be done. But I think your base is your base, right? I think your base is your base, and I don't think he intentionally neglected anyone either. So that's also important.
And maybe if he adopts the black agenda, man, maybe.
Yo, come get with me, man. Come get with me, man. Get this win, and we could lock in, and we could do great things for the city. So
stop that black exodus. We don't want no more migration.
The data is telling us that, so that's the thing, right? I understand that elected officials need to be able to govern over everyone, and I do respect that. That is good policy, but the data is telling you that this population of people can no longer afford this city. It's telling us. And, I want to raise a family here, right? I want, my niece that I have 3 years old to be here, right? And if the data is trending in this direction and you don't do anything to stop it, I think you're actually being neglectful. So I think we do, I think, and especially the black organizations in New York City, let's come together, let's put together an agenda, and let's, with the next administration, let's try to stop this black exodus.
I like that a lot. What do you say to the people or the younger people that's like not involved into politics? They're like, I can't deal with this too much, and it's just fatigue.
Yeah, you gonna end up feeling it soon, right? you're going to end up feeling it sooner or later, right? You know, we're currently in a government shutdown. Less people are going to have access to SNAP and to healthy food. People are going to start getting letters in the mail saying that their health insurance premiums are doubling, right? Taking 30-40% more out of your check. And now you can't afford health insurance. What happens if you get sick? What happens if a family member gets sick, right? If your parent has health insurance paying for the whole household, and now that premium doubles, right? What's that going to mean, right? And I think, while I do understand that people are apathetic to politics, rightfully so, we got a second term of Trump, and a lot of our leaders are letting us down. But the fact of the matter is, you know, policy decisions kill people.
Literally.
Right? People are dying because of a person's politics.
Literally.
And, you know, if you don't get involved somewhere in the state, local, federal level, I think, you know, more people are going to die. And, you know, think about the future generations if you want kids, especially things that's happening with DEI and applying to college, right? Like, if one, you need to have the courage to fight these things now, but you also need to think about the long-term damage you're going to have. And if, you know, if you're hands off, you know, you're putting your life into someone else's hands. So.
Damn, that was powerful. And that was powerful because sometimes I just think about, like, I don't think a lot of families realize how one medical occurrence they're away from poverty, like deep poverty. Like one medical occurrence, one $20,000 bill that could just be detrimental to you and your family, and take a lot of food out of your mouths just by one thing. And like to enforce that on so many Americans, you know, I feel like our administration is so hardball. But to enforce that on so many Americans is just, it's just inhumane, you know, and especially when we have so many systems around the world that can literally have shown us that we could adopt something like this, some type of healthcare, and it doesn't have to necessarily, you know, destroy their country or destroy their economy. But it's just nuts. It's really nuts. But I agree with that completely. Yeah, like, if you're not involved, man, like, especially in this day and age, like, where politics is life at this point, like, it's inextricable because it I feel like nowadays it affects your day to day so much more than it was 10, 20 years ago. Then again, you know, I wasn't as active.
Yeah,
but
this second term of Trump, right? We had Trump run. This second term of Trump, they're out for blood. Yeah,
there's things that's getting repealed back that was, you know, put in law in the 60s. You know what I mean? Like, stuff like that's detrimental to communities, especially minority communities, that people need to be paying attention to. Yeah, I guess what's some advice or motivational advice that you could give towards Gen Z, especially to end them off on a, you know, a lighter note?
Yeah, if you know me, you know I'm always saying this, but yo, stay passionate, right? I think, you know, Gen Z, our generation, we're very passionate,
yes sir,
creative individuals. You know, we're go-getters.
Gen Z, what's up, man?
For a fact. But I think in addition to that, you know, take the passion and make sure to nurture it with, you know, strategy, with intention. So don't let that flame go out. Stay passionate, but, you know, with you really start building and you really start achieving, you really start accomplishing things when you take that passion. You're able to, you know, and transform it into something that's tangible, something that's, you know, intentional, and that could actually impact lives. And think of your passion in a collective manner, right? Think about everything that you're doing, thinking about how we're advancing your community, however you define that. So yeah, stay passionate. You know, I'm the most passionate, but, you know, I can lend you some.
all right. Listen. I know Jerrell from school, NYU. He did his master's there, and I was doing my undergrad. But that passion that he's talking about, that connects you amongst the people within Gen Z or the people within your generation. You know what I mean? Like, the reason why we've been able to build a relationship over time is just because as soon as I heard that, you know, he's into politics and he actually cares about his community and doing stuff, you know, like, that's something that I want to attach myself to and be able to uplift and platform, you know. But that passion, you know, he sees it with me too, with perspective and building. So he wants to come and help out. But that's how we build as a community. That's how we build as a generation, because we're here to progress ultimately. Yeah, man. I guess last question. Let's say, I'm not saying you're running, but let's say if you were to run, or if, let's say, like a Gen Z campaigner wants to run, what would be, actually no, personally what would be your non-negotiable promise to Flatbush or the greater community of Brooklyn?
Yeah, I haven't thought about this, but, you know, if I ever was to take that endeavor, I would say that I'd let my neighborhood know that I'll never run from them. You know, I'm someone who's, you know, born and raised in my neighborhood. I'm still living there. Have lost friends to the streets. seen the neighborhood change for better or for worse. And I think many elected officials, they get a lesser level of power, and then they start to hide from their people, right? They start to hide from criticism, right? Nobody's above criticism, right?
Put a name on that bullet.
The people put you in office, right? So, one thing that I could assure for, if I'm ever in that position, that I'll never run from my neighborhood. I'll never run from criticism. Any decision that I make, I'm going to stand on it. And, I'm also a human. If I do make a mistake and it was wrong, I'll own up to it, and I'll learn from it, because that's the ability to grow. So for sure, I know one thing's for sure, two things for sure, and I'll never run from anybody, no matter what it is. So
heard you, man. Y'all here first, man. Jerrell Gray, you know a platform you gonna see him on Perspective, of course. And we're going to
platform.
It's a passionate platform. You already know, man. You already know. So listen. Links are in the description. His links are in the description as well. If you want to go figure out what he's doing, his Instagram, I don't know, websites, whatever he wants to put down, we'll link it down. But man, Gen Z, what's up? I love y'all. Be perceptive to build perspective, and I will see y'all next week. Very simple. Love y'all. Gen Z, what is up, man?
Yes, sir. Gen Z, stay passionate. Facts.
Simple.